I've always believed that love and kindness could fix anything. Maybe that's what made me naive, or maybe just human. My name is Margaret Turner, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of woman who puts everyone else first. I raised my only son, Ethan, on my own after my husband passed away when Ethan was just 10. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at the library, evenings at a small diner, just to make sure he'd never feel the absence of a father. Every cent I earned went into savings, a quiet nest egg I built for his future, and eventually for the woman he would marry. When Ethan brought Chloe home for the first time, I remember thinking, what a lovely girl. She was polite, warm, and so attentive. She called me Mom from the first week, always brought flowers when she visited, and insisted on helping with the dishes. I thought I'd struck gold, a daughter-in-law who genuinely loved my son and treated me like family. For years, I told everyone I knew how blessed I was. She's an angel, I'd say at church gatherings, while my friends rolled their eyes and warned me not to get too comfortable. But I didn't listen. Why would I? Chloe made Ethan happy, and that was all that mattered. When they got married, I gave them my small cottage to live in and moved into a smaller apartment nearby. I even gave them access to my savings account, not full control, but enough to help with their mortgage when times were tough. I trusted them both completely, especially Chloe. I thought of her as my own daughter. Looking back now, I can see the small signs, the moments that didn't feel right. The way Chloe's smile tightened when Ethan wasn't around. The way she dismissed my advice with that quiet, sugary tone. Oh, Mom, you wouldn't understand. It's a younger generation thing. I brushed it off as harmless arrogance, the kind that comes with you. But arrogance was the least of it. It was a quiet Thursday morning when everything changed. I remember because I just finished watering my plants and was about to sit down for tea when the phone rang. The caller ID said Maplewood Community Bank. My heart sank a little. I've always had a nervous habit of assuming the worst when official calls come in. Mrs. Turner, the man said, his tone cautious, rehearsed. We're calling to verify a few recent transactions on your account. My breath caught. Transactions? What kind of transactions? He read off a list of withdrawals, thousands of dollars, one after another, over the past 3 weeks. I nearly dropped the phone. My hand started to shake. There must be some mistake, I whispered. I haven't touched that account in months. The man hesitated. I understand, ma'am, but according to our records, these withdrawals were made in person, using your signature. That word, signature, hit me like a thunderclap. I demanded they email me the scan copies, and when they did, my world fell apart. There it was, my name, in handwriting so close to mine it could fool anyone. But I knew instantly it wasn't me. My signature always looped higher on the M of Margaret, while this one dipped low. It was a perfect imitation, but just wrong enough to haunt me. Someone had forged my name. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at those papers on my kitchen table, my tea growing cold beside me. My mind went through everyone who could possibly have done it. A stranger? No. Only 2 people had ever known that account existed, Ethan and Chloe. And that was when the sick feeling hit. I didn't want to believe it, but the timing made too much sense. Chloe had been talking about remodeling their kitchen recently, new cabinets, granite countertops. Ethan had told me they couldn't afford it yet. But Chloe, she had that way of getting what she wanted. My hands trembled as I opened my banking app. The balance, the life I built penny by penny was gone. Nearly $62,000 just vanished. My entire savings, the safety net I'd spent decades creating, gone in less than a month. I didn't confront them right away. I couldn't. I wanted to. Every fiber of my being screamed for it. But another part of me needed proof. Real proof. The kind that could silence denial. So, I went to the bank the next morning, pretending to be calm. The manager, an older gentleman named Mr. Lawson, took pity on me. He said, Mrs. Turner, we can't confirm who made the withdrawals, but if you'd like, we can review our security footage. I nodded, praying I was wrong. I wasn't. There she was on the screen. My daughter-in-law, Chloe Turner, wearing her designer coat, smiling as she handed over my ID and signed the forms. The footage was as clear as day. I remember clutching the edge of the desk to keep myself from collapsing. Mr. Lawson turned the monitor off quietly. I'm so sorry, ma'am, he said. I thanked him, though my voice was hollow. I drove home in silence, tears streaming down my face, but I didn't sob. It was a quiet, aching kind of heartbreak, the kind that sits deep in your bones. I didn't even know how to tell Ethan. How could I? He loved her. He built his life around her. If I told him, I'd destroy his marriage. So I told no one. Not yet. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Every part of me wanted to call the police, to scream, to demand justice. But a colder part of me, a wiser part, whispered something else. Wait. Don't rush. Let her think she's safe. And so I waited. Over the next few weeks, Chloe came over like nothing had happened. She brought cookies, hugged me, even joked about taking a girls' trip next spring, with my money no doubt. Every smile she gave me felt like a knife. But I smiled back. I played along, because by then, I had a plan forming in my mind. Her birthday was in 2 months. She loved attention, loved parties, loved being the center of every photo. So I decided that would be the day she'd get her real present, one she'd never forget. But before that day came, there were nights I almost broke. Nights when Ethan would call, asking if I was okay, and I'd choke back the truth. He'd say, Mom, Chloe and I are thinking of having a baby baby soon. Isn't that great? And I'd whisper, that's wonderful, dear, while my heart screamed, she stole your mother's life savings. I started keeping a journal just to stay sane. I wrote down every emotion, every urge to explode, and ended each entry with the same line. Let her think she's won. The lesson will come. And it would, sooner than she ever imagined. The days that followed were a strange kind of torture. Every morning, I'd wake up with a heavy heart, knowing that the person I treated like my own daughter had betrayed me. And yet, I had to pretend everything was fine. Pretending became my armor, a thin, fragile layer between fury and heartbreak. I started observing Chloe more carefully. Every gesture, every glance, every little thing she did seemed suddenly calculated. She'd visit on weekends, flashing that bright, innocent smile, calling me mom like nothing had changed. Sometimes, she'd even hand me flowers, the same way she did years ago when I first met her. Only now, the gesture felt empty. I remember one particular Saturday. She walked into my apartment, carrying a basket of muffins, all dressed up like she was going to brunch. Her hair was perfect, her perfume expensive, her voice soft as honey. Hi, Mom, she chirped. I thought I'd drop by since Ethan's working late. I baked your favorite, blueberry. I forced a smile. That's very thoughtful, Chloe. Sit down. I'll make tea. As I filled the kettle, I could feel her eyes on me. Maybe she was wondering if I knew. Maybe she thought she'd gotten away with it. Either way, I stayed calm. I had to, because when you've been betrayed, silence becomes your most powerful weapon. She chattered endlessly about renovations, new curtains, and the color she wanted for the nursery. Yes, the nursery. Apparently, she and Ethan were trying. The irony of it all made my chest ache. She was planning a future built on my stolen savings. When she finally left that day, the fake sweetness still hanging in the air, I sat alone at the table and whispered to myself, you'll get what's coming, Chloe. And it'll be in a way you'll never forget. In the weeks that followed, I began quietly collecting every piece of evidence I could find. The bank provided me with printed statements, signed forms, and security footage. I stored them all neatly in a folder marked house repairs, something innocuous, something she'd never think to touch if she ever snooped around. I even visited the bank again and requested a certified statement confirming the forgery. The staff knew the situation by then, and one young clerk, maybe out of pity, maybe respect, said softly, you could press charges, Mrs. Turner. What she did is a serious crime. I nodded but didn't say anything. Not yet. Then one evening, I took things a step further. I contacted a lawyer. His name was James Porter, a calm, sharp man with a reassuring voice. When I told him the story, he leaned back in his chair, hands steepled under his chin, and said, you have an open and shut case. This is fraud and identity theft. We can file immediately. But I shook my head. Not yet, Mr. Porter. I want to do this my way. He frowned slightly. Your way. I smiled, the kind of cold, tired smile only someone who's been deeply hurt can give. Yes, on her birthday. He hesitated, but finally nodded. Then I'll prepare everything. When you're ready, you call me. I'll have the documents signed and sealed. I walked out of his office feeling a strange mix of pain and power. For the first time since that awful call from the bank, I felt in control again. Meanwhile, Ethan was blissfully unaware. He called every other night, talking about work or asking if I'd eaten. He always spoke with that same warmth he'd had since he was a boy. It broke my heart that he didn't see who Chloe really was, but I knew, once the truth came out, his world would crumble. Still, I told myself he needed to see it. He needed to know who he'd married. One evening, Ethan invited me over for dinner. Chloe's making lasagna, he said proudly. You have to come, Mom. So I went. I smiled. I ate her food, the same hands that had signed my name on forged checks, now serving me garlic bread with a grin. It was surreal. Every bite tasted like betrayal, but I kept chewing, nodding, pretending. Halfway through dinner, Chloe said, oh, Mom, I hope you don't mind. We used a bit of your old recipe for the sauce. I looked at her and smiled gently. Of course not, dear. Use whatever you like. Inside, though, I thought, you've taken enough from me already. That night, as I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I decided I was done waiting. The next morning, I called Mr. Porter and said, file the case, but don't send the notice until I say so. He agreed. The trap was set. In the days leading up to Chloe's birthday, I planned everything meticulously. I even bought her a small, elegant gift box, the kind used for jewelry. Inside, I placed 2 items, the lawyer's official notice, and a USB drive containing the bank's CCTV footage. I wrapped it beautifully, silver paper, gold ribbon, the works. I even attached a little card that said, happy birthday, my dear daughter. As the day approached, Chloe was radiant. She'd invited friends, decorated the house, and told everyone she was planning a new chapter in her life. Little did she know that chapter was about to end. On the morning of her birthday, Ethan called me. Mom, are you coming tonight? Chloe will be so happy to see you. Of course, dear, I said softly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. That evening, I put on my best dress, navy blue, the same one I wore at their wedding, and arrived at their house with a gift box in my hands. Music played softly inside. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Chloe was glowing, surrounded by friends, her charm in full display. When she saw me, she beamed. Mom, you made it! She rushed over and hugged me tightly. Of course, sweetheart, I said, smiling faintly. Happy birthday. Everyone gathered around around as gifts piled on the table, perfume, handbags, a new smartwatch. Then Chloe picked up my little box. It was small, almost unremarkable compared to the others. "Ah, this one's from Mom," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "You always give the most thoughtful presents." I just nodded. "Go ahead, dear. Open it." She untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, and in that moment, everything shifted. Her smile froze. The room went silent. She stared at the papers inside. The lawyer's letter, official and cold, staring back at her like judgment itself. Then her trembling hand reached for the USB drive. What is this?" she stammered. I looked her in the eye, my voice calm, steady. "That's your birthday gift, Chloe. Proof of what you did." The color drained from her face. Ethan looked confused. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between us. I turned to him gently. "Maybe your wife can explain." Chloe's lips parted, but no sound came out. She just stood there, pale and speechless, as the weight of her secret came crashing down in front of everyone. And I, for the first time in months, finally felt peace. For a few seconds, no one said a word. The room, once full of laughter and music, now felt like a frozen photograph, still, heavy, tense. You could have heard a pin drop. Chloe stood there clutching the open box, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling against the papers. The color had drained completely from her face. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Chloe, what is this?" His voice was calm at first, confused, almost pleading. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was a shaky whisper. I don't know. It's some kind of mistake." I watched her carefully, the same way a mother might watch a child caught in a lie. "No mistake, dear," I said softly, my voice carrying across the room. "That's a legal notice. From my attorney." Her eyes darted between me and Ethan. "Attorney? What attorney?" "Mr. Porter," I replied, still calm. "He's handling my case, the one against the person who emptied my savings account." Ethan's expression changed instantly. Confusion gave way to shock. He looked at me, then at her. "Wait, Mom, what are you saying?" I took a deep breath, steadying my voice even as my heart thudded painfully in my chest. "I'm saying that someone forged my signature and stole over $60,000 from my bank account. And I have proof. The papers you're holding are from the lawyer. And that little flash drive, it has the security footage from the bank." Gasps rippled through the room. A few guests exchanged glances, whispering under their breath. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes, but not tears of guilt. No, these were the kind of tears people cry when they've been caught and still hope to lie their way out. "Mom, please," she said, her voice trembling. "You have it all wrong. I don't know what this is." But I cut her off gently. "Don't insult me, Chloe. I saw the footage myself. It was you, standing at the counter, using my ID, signing my name. I know every curve of my handwriting. I know my own purse, my own scarf, both of which you were wearing in that video." Ethan's face had gone pale. He turned to her, his voice suddenly sharp. "Chloe, is this true?" Her lips quivered. "No. I don't know how she—" "Don't you dare lie again," I said quietly but firmly, "because the truth is right there in front of you." For a long, painful moment, Ethan just stared at her, his jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Finally, he said, almost in a whisper, "Tell me you didn't do this." Chloe tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "Ethan, please. I only meant to borrow it. I was going to put it back. You know how stressed I've been with the renovations." "Borrow," I repeated, letting the word linger in the air. "You drained my entire life savings, Chloe. You forged my signature. You lied. That's not borrowing, that's theft." Her tears came faster now, dripping down her flawless makeup, leaving streaks across her cheeks. "I just wanted us to have a better life. For you, for Ethan, for our future. You have no idea how hard things have been." I laughed softly, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Oh, I know hardship better than you ever will, dear. I've lived it. I just never used it as an excuse to steal." She looked helplessly at Ethan, but his eyes were cold now. "You told me we got a bonus from your job," he said, voice low. "That's how you paid for the new kitchen. You lied to me." Her voice broke. "Ethan, I did it for us." He shook his head slowly. "No, Chloe, you did it for you." The silence that followed felt endless. Guests began slipping out quietly, one by one, unable to bear the tension. Within minutes, the house that had been buzzing with celebration was empty, save for the three of us. Chloe stood in the middle of the room, her birthday decorations still glittering mockingly above her head. A banner read, "Happy Birthday, Chloe," but it looked almost cruel now, hanging limp and hollow behind her. Ethan finally spoke again, his voice hoarse. "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" I looked at him, my chest tightening. "Because I wanted you to see her for who she really is. You wouldn't have believed me otherwise." He lowered his gaze, guilt washing over his face. "You're right. I wouldn't have." Chloe tried again, voice rising. "Ethan, please. You can't let her ruin our marriage." He turned to her, fury flashing in his eyes. "You ruined it yourself." His voice cracked. "You lied to my mother. You stole from her. You forged her name." Her shoulders collapsed under the weight of his words. For the first time, she had nothing left to say. I walked toward her, each step steady, deliberate. When I reached her, I placed a hand on her shoulder, not out of comfort, but finality. "Chloe," I said quietly, "do you remember when you first joined our family? How you said I was a mother you never had?" She nodded weakly, tears falling. "I believed that," I continued. "I believed every word. I loved you like my own. I wanted to trust you, but you broke that trust in a way I can never forget. I reached into my purse and pulled out one more envelope, smaller, handwritten. This is for you. She looked at it warily. What is it? Your lesson, I said simply. Inside that envelope was a copy of the official police report, filed but not yet submitted to the court. It was my final mercy. A warning. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Her eyes widened. You reported me. I met her gaze without flinching. Not yet, but I will, unless you make this right. Every cent, Chloe. You return what you stole. You apologize to my face, and you leave my son's life if he asks you to. That's your choice. For a long time, she just stood there, staring at the paper. Then, in a small, broken voice, she whispered, I'll pay it back. I swear I will. Ethan's voice was cold, resolute. You better. She nodded, sobbing quietly. I turned to leave. As I reached the door, I looked back one last time. You may have stolen my money, I said softly, but you'll never steal my peace again. Then I walked out into the cool night air, leaving behind the echo of her sobs and the ruins of her perfect little world. The stars above seemed brighter that night, maybe because I finally saw clearly too. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every expression from the confrontation. The look on Chloe's face, that mix of shock, fear, and shame, kept flashing before my eyes. For years, I thought of her as the daughter I never had, and now all I could feel was this deep, hollow ache in my chest. The next morning, the sunlight poured weakly through my curtains, but it brought no warmth. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. Mom, can we talk? I agreed to meet him later that day at my apartment. When he arrived, his face was pale, eyes tired and red. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. Mom, he began softly. I don't even know what to say. I poured him some coffee, my hand steady though my heart was breaking. You don't have to say anything, Ethan. I just hope you finally see who she really is. He nodded slowly. I do now. She confessed everything after you left. She said she panicked, that she thought she could replace the money before you noticed. Replace $60,000? I asked quietly. With what, Ethan? A miracle. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. I know. It's unforgivable. I'm just trying to process it. I reached across the table and took his hand. Son, I didn't want to ruin your marriage, but I couldn't let her get away with this. Not after everything I've sacrificed. He squeezed my hand, his voice breaking. You didn't ruin anything, Mom. She did. Later that afternoon, Chloe showed up at my door. I could see her through the peephole, eyes swollen, makeup smudged, clutching her purse like a lifeline. For a long moment, I considered not opening it. But some part of me, the part that still clung to the memory of the girl I'd once loved like family, couldn't ignore her completely. When I opened the door, she froze. Mom, she whispered. Mrs. Turner. I corrected her, my tone cool. Her lips trembled. Please, I just need to talk. I stepped aside, letting her in, but I didn't offer her a seat. She stood awkwardly in the living room, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I crossed my arms. You stole from me, Chloe. You lied to me. You looked me in the eye every week, knowing what you'd done. That's not an accident. That's cruelty. She broke down, sobbing. I was desperate. We were drowning in bills, and I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I took it just for a little while, I could put it back once Ethan's bonus came through. I shook my head. And yet, you remodeled the kitchen, bought new clothes, hosted parties. That doesn't sound like desperation, Chloe. That sounds like greed. Her sobs grew louder. I know. I was wrong. I hate myself for it. Please don't press charges. I'll pay everything back, I swear. I stared at her for a long moment. There was something pitiful in her now, the way her arrogance had crumbled into tears. The pity wasn't forgiveness. I already gave you a chance, I said quietly. That letter wasn't just a warning. It was mercy. You return every cent, and I'll stay silent. But if you lie again, or delay a single payment, I'll let the law handle the rest. She nodded frantically, wiping her tears. I'll pay it all back, I promise. I'll sell my jewelry, my car, anything. I didn't respond. I just turned away, signaling the conversation was over. She lingered for a moment before whispering, thank you, and slipping out the door. When she was gone, I sat down and let out a shaky breath. My heart ached, not for her, but for what we'd lost. Trust, love, family, all shattered in a single act of greed. Days turned into weeks. Ethan stayed with me for a while. He didn't say much, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He trusted her completely, and she'd broken him too. He helped me track the repayments. Chloe sent money in small amounts, weekly transfers, each one labeled repayment. She kept her word, at least for now. One evening, as we sat watching an old movie together, Ethan turned to me. Mom, do you think people like her can ever change? I thought for a moment before answering. Maybe, but not without losing something first. Sometimes, people only learn when they got nothing left to lose. He nodded quietly. I still love her, you know. I know, I said softly. Love doesn't vanish overnight, but don't let love blind you again. Love should make you better, not smaller. He leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of peace in his expression. A few months passed. Chloe paid back most of the money, piece by piece. I didn't care about the pace, only the principle. She'd faced what she'd done one payment at a time. Then one day, Ethan came home from work and said she moved out. I looked at him. Where to? Her sister's place, he said quietly. quietly. She said she needs to figure out who she is, and that she doesn't deserve another chance with me. I nodded slowly. She's right about that. He gave a small, bitter laugh. I guess so. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then I said, you know, Ethan, sometimes life has a way of teaching lessons we're too kind to give ourselves. He looked at me, eyes soft. You've always been stronger than I realized, Mom. I smiled faintly. No, son. I just learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean letting people back in. Sometimes it means closing the door with grace. That night, I took out my old journal, the one I filled with notes and pain during those long weeks of waiting. I flipped to the last page and wrote one final line. Justice doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from silence and a well-timed gift box. Then I closed it and placed it back on the shelf. The story was over, but the lesson would last forever. Months passed, and though life began to settle again, there was an emptiness that lingered, a space once filled with trust, laughter, and family dinners. I had imagined growing old surrounded by warmth and gratitude, not this hollow quiet. Still, I reminded myself daily, peace is better than pretense. Every morning, I'd rise early, make my tea, and sit by the window. I'd watch the sun climb over the neighborhood rooftops and let the silence wash over me. No more lies, no more pretending, just stillness. Ethan still came by every evening after work. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes flowers. He didn't say it out loud, but I could tell he felt guilty, not for her actions, but for not seeing the truth sooner. One evening, as I was making dinner, he asked quietly, "Do you hate her, Mom?" I looked at him for a long moment, then shook my head. No, hate is too heavy to carry. I just don't trust her anymore. And once trust is gone, it rarely finds its way back. He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. I wish things had been different. So do I said softly. But sometimes life needs to break us before it shows us what really matters. He smiled faintly. You always know how to make things sound simple. I chuckled. That's age talking, dear. You learn that bitterness doesn't heal, only boundaries do. By late spring, Chloe had repaid most of what she owed. Each transfer came through like clockwork, small amounts labeled repayment to Margaret Turner. At first, each notification made my stomach twist, a reminder of betrayal. But over time, they became symbols of something else, accountability. Then one day, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found a small brown envelope on the step. No name, no address, just for Mrs. Turner. Inside was a handwritten note. Mrs. Turner, this is the final payment. I've sold my car and cleared everything I owe you. I know money can't fix what I did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll think of me without anger. Chloe, for a moment, I just stood there, reading her words over and over. My hands trembled slightly, but not from rage, from release. I could feel the tightness in my chest finally beginning to ease. I sat down, folded the letter neatly, and placed it inside my journal, right next to my last entry. Not as a memory of pain, but as a chapter closed. That weekend, Ethan came over again. He looked calmer than I'd seen him in months. She finished paying you back, didn't she? He asked. I nodded. Yes, she did. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. She called me, you know. Said she's leaving the city for a while, maybe staying with her sister up north. She wants to start over. Good, I said simply. Maybe she'll learn what honesty feels like. He smiled sadly. You know, despite everything, part of me still hopes she finds peace. That's because you're a good man, I said softly. You got that from your father. He looked at me with those same kind eyes his father once had, steady, kind, and full of quiet strength. You raised me better than to stay angry forever. Then make sure you live better, too, I replied. Over the next few months, something remarkable happened. My life, the one I feared would remain lonely and bitter, began to bloom again. I joined a local gardening club, met a few kind women around my age, and even started volunteering at the library again. For the first time in years, I laughed freely. I found myself cooking for joy instead of habit, humming while watering my plants, smiling at strangers in the park. It was as though, in losing my savings, I had regained something far more precious, my peace. Ethan, too, was healing. He began going out more, reconnecting with old friends, even taking a few short trips for work. I could see his spirit slowly returning. One evening, as we shared dinner, he said quietly, Mom, I think I'm finally ready to move on. I looked up from my plate, smiling softly. Good, that's all I ever wanted for you. He hesitated. You think I'll ever be able to trust someone again? I thought for a moment before answering. Yes, but don't look for perfection, Ethan. Look for honesty. It's not the mistakes that destroy love, it's the lies that follow them. He nodded, absorbing my words, and for the first time, I saw real peace in his eyes. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in my garden trimming the roses when my neighbor Helen called out over the fence. Margaret, you seem brighter these days. What's your secret? I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. Forgiveness, I suppose. She tilted her head. You forgave that daughter-in-law of yours. I chuckled softly. Not exactly. I forgave myself for trusting too much, for ignoring the signs, for staying silent too long. Once I did that, the rest stopped hurting so much. Helen nodded knowingly. You're stronger than most, you know. Maybe, I said, smiling faintly. Or maybe I just finally learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's just the quiet decision decision to never let someone break you twice. That night, I sat by the window again, tea in hand, listening to the distant sound of crickets. The sky was painted with stars, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I thought about Chloe, wherever she was, and hoped she'd truly learn something. Maybe she'd rebuild herself into a better person. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my burden anymore. As I finished my tea, I whispered softly into the still night air. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about peace. And in that moment, I knew the storm had finally passed. By summer, the shadows of that awful chapter had begun to fade, though the memories still lingered, soft but sharp enough to remind me of what I'd endured. Life had finally begun to feel normal again. The laughter of my neighbors on warm evenings, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the gentle rhythm of rain on my window, all those small, forgotten joys began to return. I found peace not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments. Morning walks through the park, freshly brewed coffee on the porch, a letter from Ethan now, and then when he traveled for work. My days were simple, but my heart was light. One afternoon, I was sitting at my favorite cafe reading a novel when someone called softly, "Mrs. Turner." I looked up and froze. It was Chloe. For a moment, time seemed to stop. She looked different, thinner, paler, her hair tied back plainly. No jewelry, no designer purse, no trace of the proud young woman who used to strut through every room like she owned it. Instead, she looked human, broken even. She smiled nervously. "May I sit?" I hesitated, but finally nodded. For a few minutes, she sat across from me, hands clasped tightly together. "You look well," she said softly. "I am," I replied. "Peace suits me." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I can see that." There was a long silence. The hum of the cafe filled the space between us until she finally spoke again. "I know I don't deserve your time or your kindness," she said, voice trembling. "But I wanted to see you, to tell you I'm sorry, properly this time." I said nothing, waiting. "I was angry at life," she continued. "Jealous even. You had what I didn't. Discipline, stability, strength. I thought if I could just get ahead somehow, if I could have everything now, maybe I'd finally feel secure. But all I did was destroy the one family that accepted me." Her voice cracked. "I've spent months thinking about what I did. Paying you back didn't make it right. It just reminded me every day of how wrong I was." I watched her quietly, trying to read her. For the first time, there was no performance, no manipulation in her tone. Just regret, raw and heavy. Finally, I said softly, "What do you want from me, Chloe?" She shook her head. "Nothing. I don't want forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I'm trying to change. I've started working at a shelter. I live simply now. No lies, no pretending." I looked at her for a long time, weighing her words. There was no satisfaction in her downfall, only a quiet ache, a sad truth about how far people can fall when greed blinds them. "I believe people can change," I said finally, "but they have to carry the weight of their choices forever." She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I know. I carry it every day." She reached into her purse and slid a small folded card across the table. "This is just something I wanted to give you. Not money, just words." I unfolded it slowly. Inside, written in neat, shaky handwriting, were 6 words. "Thank you for teaching me truth." I stared at the words for a long moment. They were simple, but heavy. When I looked up, Chloe was already standing. "Goodbye, Mrs. Turner," she said softly. "I hope your heart stays peaceful." And before I could reply, she walked out, disappearing into the sunlight. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about how pain had changed her. Maybe this was what justice really looked like, not revenge, but revelation. When Ethan called later that evening, I told him she'd visited. There was a pause on the line before he said, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Better than I've been in years." "Did she apologize?" "She did, and I think she meant it." He exhaled slowly. "That's good, I guess." "Ethan," I said gently, "you don't have to hate her forever. Just learn from her. We all make mistakes. Some of us just make bigger ones." He was quiet for a long moment. Then softly he said, "You've forgiven her, haven't you?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe not forgiven, but I've let go. There's a difference." Weeks passed. I began to notice small signs of life returning in ways I hadn't expected. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in decades. I filled my apartment with color, gentle blues, warm yellows, and soft pinks. My home no longer felt like a place of loss. It felt like a reflection of survival. Ethan helped me repaint the living room one weekend. As we worked, he said, "You know, Mom, I've been thinking about moving somewhere new. A fresh start." I looked at him with a smile. "That sounds perfect." He paused, glancing at me. "Would you be okay with that? Me living farther away?" "Of course," I said. "You've spent too long being the son who stayed close because he worried about his mother. Go live, Ethan. You've earned it." He smiled, and for the first time since everything happened, it reached his eyes. That evening, after he left, I stood in front of the mirror, studying the woman looking back at me. There were more lines now, more gray in my hair, but I didn't mind. Each wrinkle, each scar, emotional or otherwise, told a story. I realized then that I hadn't lost my strength in this ordeal. I'd simply been refining it. Life had taught me something that no book or sermon ever could, that revenge feels satisfying for a moment, but peace lasts a lifetime. I walked to the window and watched the sunset paint the horizon poison in gold and orange. A quiet smile crept across my face. Sometimes, I whispered to myself, life takes everything from you just to show you what really matters. And that truth, simple, clear, and unshakable, filled my heart with a calm I had been searching for all along. A few months passed after my meeting with Chloe, and the air around my life finally felt clean again, light, still, and pure. The kind of peace that doesn't arrive suddenly, but slowly, like dawn after a long night. Every morning now, I woke to birdsong instead of worry. I brewed my coffee, sat on the porch, and allowed myself to feel not the sting of betrayal anymore, but the soft relief of survival. And yet, even peace can feel strange when you've lived too long with pain. Some mornings, I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting another message from the bank, or a call from Ethan about some new crisis. But none came. The world had moved on, and so had I. Still, every time I passed the old photo of Ethan and Chloe on the mantel, the one from their wedding day, a tiny ache stirred in my chest. Not anger, just sadness for what could have been. They looked so happy in that picture, her head resting on his shoulder, his eyes bright with love. I used to think that photo captured the beginning of something beautiful. Now I saw it for what it was, a moment frozen before truth unraveled it all. One Sunday morning, I was sitting in church, listening to the sermon about forgiveness. The pastor, a gentle old man named Father Harris, said something that stuck with me. Forgiveness, he said, isn't letting someone off the hook. It's letting yourself off the hook. It's choosing peace over poison. I stared down at my clasped hands, those words echoing in my mind. Peace over poison. Was that what I had done? I had let go of the rage, yes, but deep down, there was still a tiny shard of bitterness lodged like glass in my heart. I thought about Chloe, her trembling hands, her apology, her brokenness. Had I really forgiven her, or had I just buried the wound deep enough to stop bleeding? When the service ended, I lingered for a while, lighting a candle before I left. I whispered a small prayer, not for myself this time, but for her. For Chloe, help her find the person she was meant to be, I murmured, and help me finally forgive her. That night, I dreamed of my late husband, Robert. It had been years since I'd seen his face in my dreams, but he looked just as I remembered. Kind eyes, soft smile, the smell of cedar and aftershave. In the dream, we were sitting on our old porch swing, just like we used to on summer nights. The air was warm, and fireflies danced in the dark. You've been strong, Maggie, he said, using the nickname only he ever used. But strength isn't just about standing firm. It's about knowing when to let go. I reached for his hand, tears welling in my dream self's eyes. I just wanted justice, Robert. He smiled gently, and you got it. But justice isn't the same as peace. Don't confuse the two. When I woke up, I could still feel the warmth of his hand in mine. For the first time, I understood what he meant. I didn't need Chloe to suffer anymore. I didn't need her name dragged through the courts or the neighborhood gossip. She had already faced her reckoning, not from me, but from life itself. And that realization, that forgiveness could exist without reconciliation, freed me in a way nothing else could. The next day, I decided to take down the wedding photo. I didn't throw it away. I simply placed it in a box with other old memories, things that once mattered deeply, but no longer needed to be seen every day. As I sealed the box, I whispered, "Goodbye, Chloe. Goodbye to what I thought we had." Then I made myself a fresh cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood children play in the street. Their laughter was bright and unfiltered, like sunlight. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a smile come easily to my lips. A week later, Ethan dropped by unannounced, carrying a small pot of lavender. "For your porch," he said. "You always said the scent helped you sleep." I smiled. "You remembered." He sat down beside me, sipping tea from his favorite mug. "You seem lighter lately. Happier." "I am," I said honestly. "I finally found a way to stop carrying what isn't mine anymore." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "The anger," I said softly. "The pain. The endless why me questions. I realized it's like holding onto a rope that's burning your hand. You think you're keeping control, but really, you're just hurting yourself." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been angry, too. At her. At myself. I think I'm still learning how to let that go." I looked at him, my heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. "You will. One day, you'll wake up and it won't hurt anymore. It'll just be a story, one that taught you something." He smiled faintly. Maybe that day's coming sooner than I thought. That night, as I stood on the porch breathing in the scent of lavender, I felt Robert's words echo again. Justice isn't peace. He was right. The true gift wasn't the confrontation or even the repayment. It was what came after, the quiet strength that grows when you choose peace over vengeance. I realized then that my gift to Chloe hadn't just been that box on her birthday. The real gift was the lesson it carried for both of us. For her, it was about accountability. For me, it was about release. Maybe we had both learned something we'd needed all along. The wind rustled softly through the trees, and I closed my eyes, letting it wash over me. Somewhere deep inside, I whispered a silent goodbye to the version of myself who had cried over betrayal, who had stayed away counting losses. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone wiser, stronger, and finally free. Autumn arrived softly that year, brushing gold and rust across the trees outside my window. The air grew cooler, the mornings quieter, and life began to move at a gentler pace. My garden garden bloomed in soft oranges and deep purples, and the lavender Ethan had brought me grew strong, its scent spilling into the breeze every evening. Peace, real peace, doesn't come all at once. It arrives slowly, the way dawn creeps over the horizon, inch by inch. And that's exactly how I began to feel, renewed, one small moment at a time. But every now and then, the past would whisper. A familiar smell, a certain song, a random face on the street, all capable of stirring that ghost of memory. And sometimes, in those quiet moments, I think of Chloe. I didn't hate her anymore. In truth, I didn't feel much of anything, just a quiet curiosity. Where was she now? Did she keep her promise to change? One day, I got my answer. It was a chilly Wednesday morning when I stopped by the library where I used to volunteer. As I walked through the aisles of books, I heard a soft voice from the children's reading area. Familiar somehow. Gentle. Calm. When I turned the corner, I froze. There she was, Chloe. She was sitting on the carpet with a small group of children, reading aloud from a picture book. Her hair was shorter now, her clothes simple and neat. She laughed, a quiet, genuine laugh I'd never heard from her before. It wasn't the polished, performative kind she used to wear like jewelry. This one was real. I stood there, watching silently. When she noticed me, her voice faltered for just a second, but then she continued reading. When the story ended and the children scampered off, she walked over slowly. "Mrs. Turner," she said, her voice careful but steady. "Chloe," I replied. "I didn't expect to see you here." She smiled faintly. "I volunteer on Wednesdays. Helps keep me grounded." I nodded, studying her face. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, not from stress, but from growth. "You look different." "I feel different," she said softly. "I've been rebuilding, one day at a time. I still have a lot to make up for." I looked around at the bright drawings pinned to the wall, the laughter still echoing from nearby. "Seems like you're starting in the right place." Her eyes shimmered. I wanted to say thank you again. "You could have ruined me, Mrs. Turner. You could have destroyed my name, my freedom. But instead, you gave me a chance to face myself. I'll never forget that." I felt something warm rise in my chest, not pride, but peace. "It wasn't kindness, Chloe. It was the only way I knew how to end the pain." She nodded slowly. "And you did. You ended mine, too." We stood there for a few quiet moments. No anger, no bitterness. Just two women bound by a painful truth and finally freed by it. "I hope you're happy now," I said softly. "I'm getting there," she replied. "Happiness used to mean having everything. Now it just means sleeping without guilt." I smiled faintly. "That's a good kind of happiness." She hesitated before saying, "Tell Ethan I'm proud of him. He deserved better, and I hope he finds it someday." "I'll tell him," I said. As she turned to leave, I called out, "Chloe." She looked back, eyes wide. "Don't waste your second chance," I said gently. She nodded once, tears glistening, then disappeared around the corner, leaving behind a silence that didn't hurt anymore. That night, I told Ethan about the encounter. "She's volunteering now?" he asked, surprised. "Yes." She looked peaceful. He leaned back, processing it all. "That's good. I think that's what she needed. Time away from all the pretending." I nodded. We all needed that. After a long pause, he smiled faintly. "You know, Mom, maybe the best revenge really is just living well." I laughed softly. "Now you sound like me." He grinned. "Guess I learned from the best." In the weeks that followed, I began writing again, something I hadn't done since I was young. Short stories at first, inspired by my own life, though I changed names and details. I wrote about betrayal, loss, redemption, and quiet justice. It felt good to take pain and turn it into something that might help others heal too. When I finished my first story, I titled it The Gift Box. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a woman who found her strength through heartbreak, who realized that justice without compassion turns to bitterness. It was my story, but also every woman's story who's ever been betrayed, used, or underestimated. I shared it anonymously on a local forum, not expecting much. But to my surprise, people began commenting, hundreds of them. One wrote, "I went through something similar. I cried reading this. Thank you." Another said, "This story reminded me that forgiveness doesn't mean weakness." And one that touched me most, "Sometimes the real gift is a lesson we never asked for." I closed my laptop and sat in silence, tears welling in my eyes, not from sadness, but from release. Maybe this was why I'd lived through it all, not just to survive it, but to tell it. As winter approached, I felt no bitterness, no lingering resentment. Just gratitude, strange as that sounds. Gratitude for the lesson, for the strength I had found, for the peace I'd earned. The money was long gone and long repaid, but what I gained in return was something far richer, wisdom. I realized that sometimes, the people who break us are also the ones who push us toward becoming who we were meant to be. That night, as I sipped my tea and watched the first snowflakes fall, I whispered a quiet prayer. Thank you for the storm that taught me calm. Because in the end, that was the true story, not of theft or betrayal, but of transformation. Winter came quietly that year, not harsh or cruel, just soft like a sigh of relief. The world seemed hushed under a thin blanket of snow, and for the first time in years, my heart matched that stillness. I'd made peace with my past, my pain, and even the people who had caused it. But peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking. One evening, I sat by the fireplace with my old journal, the one where I'd written everything during those dark weeks. The pages were filled with anger, tears, and and notes of quiet revenge. But at the end of it all, I had added something new, a reflection. Pain doesn't disappear. It transforms. I smiled as I read the line. Every word in that journal had carried me from heartbreak to healing. It was strange, almost poetic, how something born from betrayal had turned into something sacred, a record of growth. A few days before Christmas, Ethan called. "Mom, I got some news," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "Oh," I asked, curious. "I met someone." My heart skipped a beat. "Really?" He chuckled nervously. "Yeah, her name's Claire. We've been seeing each other for a few months, but I wanted to be sure before I told you." I smiled into the phone. "And now you're sure?" "I am," he said softly. "She's kind, patient, and real, Mom. She knows what happened before, and she doesn't judge me for it." "That sounds wonderful, Ethan." "It is," he said, then hesitated. "But I wanted to ask you something. Do you think I'm ready? After everything that happened?" I thought for a moment, then replied gently, "You're ready when you stop comparing. Don't love her to fill a hole, son. Love her because she brings peace where there used to be pain." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You always know the right thing to say." I laughed softly. "That's what mothers are for." That Christmas Eve, Ethan brought Claire over for dinner. She was sweet, warm smile, honest eyes, the kind of woman whose kindness showed before she ever said a word. She helped me set the table, chatted easily, and treated Ethan with quiet respect. As I watched them together, I felt something loosen in my chest. For years, I'd worried that the betrayal he endured would scar him forever, that it would harden his heart. But seeing him now, laughing, relaxed, whole again, I realized that he'd finally healed. After dinner, as I was washing the dishes, Claire came to help. "You've raised a good man, Mrs. Turner," she said softly. I smiled. "Thank you. I just reminded him to keep his heart open, even when it hurt." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's hard to do." "It is," I said, drying a plate. "But it's harder to live with a closed one." Later that night, after they left, I sat by the window again. Snow fell gently outside, catching the glow of the streetlights. It reminded me of that first night after everything happened, when I had sat in this very spot, broken and lost. Back then, the world had felt cruel, unfair, merciless. But now it felt forgiving. I realized something profound in that moment. Pain isn't the opposite of peace, it's the path to it. Without heartbreak, we'd never learn how strong our hearts truly are. I opened my journal once more and began writing a new entry, not of anger, but of gratitude. To the woman who stole from me, I wrote, "Thank you. You took my savings, but in return, you gave me something priceless, clarity. You showed me who I was, what I could endure, and what truly matters. I don't hate you anymore. In a strange way, I hope you found the peace I found too." When I finished writing, I closed the journal, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. A week later, I received a letter in the mail, no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar at first, but my heart recognized it before my mind did. It was from Chloe, Mrs. Turner. I heard about Ethan's new relationship through a mutual friend. I'm truly happy for him. He deserves the kind of love that heals, not harms. I've stayed away because I didn't want to disturb your peace, but I wanted you to know I kept my promise. I've rebuilt my life. I work with children now. They remind me that innocence can be protected even after it's been broken. Thank you for teaching me that lesson, even when it cost you everything. I'll never forget you. Chloe. I folded the letter slowly, tears welling in my eyes. But they weren't tears of pain this time. They were tears of closure. I whispered quietly to the empty room, "Good for you, Chloe. You finally learned." That night, I placed her letter beside my journal, the two pieces of my past that had shaped my future. The woman who had hurt me and the woman I had become because of it now existed side by side, not as enemies, but as parts of the same story. When I went to bed, I slept soundly. No nightmares, no regrets, just peace. As winter melted into spring, life carried on. Ethan and Claire grew closer, laughter returned to my home, and the world felt light again. I tended my garden, read my books, and smiled at strangers who passed by my gate. I no longer carried the burden of betrayal, only the lesson it left behind. Because some storms don't come to destroy you. They come to clear your path, and mine at last was clear. Spring returned brighter than ever. The days were longer, the air smelled of blooming lilacs, and the quiet hum of life seemed to pulse with forgiveness. I spent most mornings tending my garden, humming softly to myself while the sunlight spilled across my hands. It's strange how the world feels different after pain. Colors seem richer. The smallest joys, the warmth of tea, the chirping of birds, the sound of a neighbor's laughter, all become reminders that life moves forward no matter what. Sometimes, I'd pause by the lavender pot Ethan had given me and smile. It had grown tall and full, its scent drifting through my open window every evening. It was more than just a plant now. It was a symbol of healing, proof that something once small and fragile could bloom again after being cared for with patience. That lavender had survived the frost, and so had I. One evening, I invited Ethan and Claire over for dinner. The table was set with candles, soft music played in the background, and laughter filled the room again, the kind of laughter that only comes when hearts are finally unburdened. After dinner, we sat on the porch watching the sky turn gold and pink. Claire rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, and for a moment, everything felt whole again. "Mom," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "I never got to thank you." I looked at him, smiling. crying. For what, dear? For how you handled everything, he said softly. You could have gone after her, destroyed her, and honestly, no one would have blamed you. But you didn't. You chose something better. You taught me that strength doesn't come from revenge. It comes from restraint. I chuckled gently. Well, revenge is loud, son. But peace whispers, and it lasts longer. Claire smiled. That's beautiful. It's true, I said, gazing out at the sunset. You see, forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about freeing yourself from what was holding you prisoner. When I let go of my anger, I got my life back. Ethan nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. You taught me how to let go too. I don't think I could have moved on without watching you do it first. I reached over, squeezing his hand. That's all I ever wanted for you, to move on, but wiser this time. To love again without fear. He smiled, looking at Claire. I think I'm finally there. After they left that night, I sat alone on the porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. The night air was calm, and the stars shimmered faintly in the distance. I thought about everything that had happened, from that dreadful call from the bank to the quiet evening I was now living. It all felt like a lifetime ago. I realized then that my story wasn't about betrayal at all. It was about endurance, about reclaiming power without losing grace. There's a certain beauty in the kind of justice that doesn't shout. When Chloe stole from me, I thought she'd taken everything. My money, my trust, my peace. But in the end, she had only taken the version of me that was too forgiving, too soft, too eager to believe everyone's intentions were pure. The woman I became afterward was stronger, wiser, and calmer. She loved herself enough to set boundaries, and that, I learned, was the deepest form of self-respect. A few weeks later, I visited the same cafe where I'd last seen Chloe. The owner, a kind young woman named Lily, greeted me warmly. You're back. The usual tea. Yes, please, I said with a smile. As I waited, I noticed a small community bulletin board near the counter. Flyers covered it, announcements for classes, lost pets, and charity events. One caught my eye. Children's reading program. Volunteers needed. Coordinator, Chloe Bennett. My heart warmed. I traced the name with my fingers and smiled. She had really done it. She built something good from the ashes of her mistakes. I didn't need to speak to her again. I didn't need to reopen old wounds. Knowing she had found her way was enough. Some stories don't need sequels. Some endings are quiet. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing again. This time, not a story, but a letter. A letter to anyone who'd ever been betrayed, hurt, or taken for granted. It began like this. Dear heartbroken one, if someone has stolen your peace, don't rush to steal theirs. Sometimes, silence teaches louder lessons than anger ever could. You don't have to destroy someone to find justice. Let life handle that. It always does. Your only job is to heal, to grow, and to rise higher than the pain they cause. Because the sweetest revenge is not seeing them suffer. It's seeing yourself smile again. With love, Margaret Turner. When I finished, I read it aloud to myself. My voice didn't tremble this time. It was steady, strong, full of quiet power. I decided to post it online under the same anonymous name I'd used before. Within hours, messages began to pour in, people sharing their own stories of betrayal, loss, and strength. Some said the letter gave them hope, others said it made them cry. And as I read their words, I realized that what began as my pain had become something much bigger, a story of resilience that belonged to everyone who'd ever been broken and rebuilt themselves piece by piece. Now, as I sit here writing the final lines of this chapter of my life, I can say with certainty, I no longer carry bitterness, only gratitude for the lessons, for the growth, for the peace that came after the storm. Because in the end, Chloe didn't just steal my savings, she gave me something worth far more. She gave me a reason to start over. Sometimes, betrayal isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of your strength. People may take from you your trust, your money, your love, but they can never take your spirit unless you let them. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's simply about finding peace and letting life balance the scales. So if you've ever been wronged, remember this. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to shout every truth. Sometimes, all you have to do is rise, silently and gracefully, until the person who hurt you no longer matters. Because peace is the loudest revenge. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget, subscribe for more stories like this.